Que bueno, everyone. Que bueno. Calix Boxing here. Sub to the channel, all that good stuff. First of all, friendly reminder to keep God first in your life. Just wanted to throw that out there. The WBO, even a broken clock is right twice a day. The WBO did something right. They're ordering Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter. 60% goes to Terence Crawford. Figure it out within 30 days or we go to a purse bid. This is beautiful. Beautiful. This is the first fight I can think of since the Crawford fight, since the Gamboa fight for Crawford, that I sit there and think to myself, I can see a possibility where Terence Crawford's adversary here can possibly win the fight. And I picked Crawford to beat Gamboa by knockout, yes, but the revisionist history will tell you that he was supposed to walk over Gamboa. There were a lot of people picking Gamboa in that fight. All right, so this is the first time for Terence Crawford in a while where I could say, you know what, I can see that guy possibly doing some things in the ring to give Crawford some trouble. I can see stylistically where he has some attributes that could give Terence Crawford some trouble in this fight. Shawn Porter is the first person I can think of. And why this fight is important is we've been wanting the fight at 147 to solidify Crawford as a top pound for pound guy. That fight has been evading him for whatever reason. The business, the politics, he's been over there on Top Rank Island at 147. But that fight has been evading him for years. And at 34 years old, you got to step on it. He needs that fight. So this fight comes out of left field. WBO orders it. And finally, I'm excited for a Terence Crawford fight because this is the fight at 147 that can solidify him. Shawn Porter is a guy who, one of his losses, only one of his losses you can point to and say, that's a definitive loss, the Kell Brook fight. Errol Spence fight was close. Keith Thurman fight was close. Both close fights. All right, and Errol Spence is another guy in the top 2 or 3 in the division, top 2 in the division, and Shawn Porter gave him a lot of trouble. And the reason Shawn Porter gives guys trouble, the reason Shawn Porter is always going to be a tough out, is he can give you many different looks in there. He's a guy that's not going to back down. He's one of the few guys at 147 at the PBC who's willing to mix it up with other top fighters. And you could say that's because he's a little bit expendable. He's not as marketable as some of the other guys at 147. But for whatever reason, he's been mixing it up with top guys at 147 and has been successful. In that he's come out of that, and you can say there's only one definitive loss there. He's come out of that, still has his wits about him, all right? And still a guy you can point to and say, that's a top 5 welterweight. Shawn Porter's that guy. He gives us that competitive edge, a competitive look against a guy like Terence Crawford, where you can say, I can see some attributes in him that would give Terence Crawford a tough fight. Terence Crawford passed the eye test with flying colors. When everybody looks at Terence Crawford, everybody who knows what they're looking at says that's a great fighter. But you still have to have the name on the resume, names on the resume to verify that, to back up what you're looking at. And that's what we've been missing for Terence Crawford up to this point. His victories haven't aged well. He doesn't have that big name on his resume. This begins that process. This begins that process. So if this fight comes off, hopefully it does. If Terence Crawford were to beat Shawn Porter, that's a definitive win at 147, especially if he does it with flying colors, especially if he looks great doing it. You say, all right, the eye test is finally verified. This is a top 3-4 pound for pound guy. And if he beats Shawn Porter going away and then he follows that up with another big fighter, you start to think, okay, this is the top pound for pound fighter in the world. All right, this fight begins that process. For Shawn Porter, stylistically, what could give Crawford trouble is he's a guy who can give you many different looks. He's a diverse fighter. He can be offensive minded, keep his hands free and let his hands go. Decent defensive fighter, great chin. He showed that he has a great chin. So he's going to walk through Terence Crawford's punches at least for a while. I don't think this is the type of fight where Terence Crawford methodically breaks down Shawn Porter like he's methodically broke down other fighters. And that's what makes this fight interesting, because Shawn Porter has the chin, survival skills, and the mental fortitude to go 12 with the Terence Crawford, at least on paper. So that's another thing that Shawn Porter has that could give Terence Crawford a little bit of competition here. And then also, he's a guy who can yuck up the fight if none of that is going well for him. He's a physically imposing fighter, muscular, stocky, and he can clinch. He can make it ugly if he has to go there as well. All right, can fight off of his back foot if he has to, but would prefer to fight off of his front foot. So you have two guys who would prefer to fight off their front foot, would prefer to let their hands go. Both have killer instinct. All right, both have great chins. So I see this as a 12-round fight that could get interesting on the scorecards. I favor Terence Crawford, obviously. I would favor him like 75-25, to be honest. But there's that 25%. And in all the Terence Crawford fights before this, there wasn't that 25% to where you could say, you know what, I give this guy a 25% chance of possibly pulling this off. We didn't have that before. This gives us a name on the resume for Terence Crawford. This starts that process that we've been waiting for, all right? To where at 34 years old, he's finally gonna have that name recognition on his resume, hopefully. And it gives Shawn Porter another fight. He had the shot against Errol Spence, Keith Thurman. The fights were close. He didn't get the decisions. This gives him another opportunity for it. And it gives us another great fight at 147. We got Pacquiao versus Spence, which is a great fight on paper. And now we got Crawford versus Thurman, hopefully. I mean, Crawford versus Thurman. Crawford versus Porter, hopefully. Hopefully. All right. To start to solidify Terence Crawford's resume and see if this guy really is great. So hit me up. Let me know what y'all think. Let me know if y'all think Shawn Porter can win this fight. God bless. Peace.